Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Everlasting Veteran Podcast. I am joined in studio with Lucas Burton, originally from Ontario and now British Columbia.
That's right.
Welcome to the show. It's been a journey in itself, us connecting, messaging back and forth to get you on the show. My schedule, your schedule, stuff popping up. I do apologize for that, but welcome to the show. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And hey, everything happens in its time, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. So
this is when it's supposed to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything happens for a reason. It's not a cliche thing to say.
No.
It is true.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like that, but I've even said that to myself. I don't like that, especially when things are rough and it's happening. It's hard to accept that. It's what's actually going on. So
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, though, if you accept that everything happens for a reason, you can also accept that this too shall pass.
100%. Yeah.
So accepting both at the same time allows you to get through whatever you're going through, highs and lows.
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
So dive a little bit into the listeners and watchers to be able to get to know you a little bit. Where did your journey start as far as diving into the mental health realm with psychology and helping other people?
So, yeah, I mean, my journey was interesting. As a young kid, I wasn't considered smart. I had some learning disabilities. Certainly, lots of my own trauma situations from a young boy. Was molested as a kid. Some inappropriate relationships when I was a teenager, and sort of that led to, you realize you don't want to be here. Thoughts about suicide, ending your life, and then this huge moment happened, and my sister came and picked me up where I was living in Ontario and took me to a different place in Ontario, and she got me some help. And I met this social worker. Like, first I met a counselor, and he really helped me out a lot to work through all this trauma, all this. I just didn't know what to do with it and how to accept it. That was a big thing. But I met this social worker, and she was trying to help me, like, where I would fit in, learning a skill or a trait. And she said to me, Luke, those people are still directing your life right now. Like, it's awful, but what are you going to do now? Like, and that always stuck with me. And she did this paperwork, and it said either you're going to be a good pastor or you're going to be a good counselor. And I always enjoyed talking to people. And for some reason, I would be comfortable just talking to people about real life things. And, full disclosure, I thought I'd be a pastor. That didn't work out. And then I signed up to be a counselor. And that's sort of how that whole journey took place. Going to school, but also doing placements and really embracing and working on myself during that whole period. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Hopefully that gives enough detail.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do find a lot of times that it is difficult for people to open up to be able to heal and move through things. And, that's a big part of, kind of why I started this podcast as well, of helping transition and purpose for military members, understanding that, multiple transitions can be challenging, regaining your identity, your purpose in life after, either a career long or however long it is, in the military, first responder realm, and other people can relate too, and getting that perspective, whether, your journey, you were doing one thing for, a decade or more, and then you transition to a different, job or whatever in your life. There's a lot of factors and variables that, when they change, it could be uneasy and uncomfortable. And, learning how to deal with that and move past it in a positive way sometimes is challenging in itself as well.
100%. I mean, the saying is get comfortable being uncomfortable. But what I found, like even for myself, when you're in it, right, when you're actually going through all those experiences and trying to readjust and realign and be okay generally with who you are and who you're becoming, it's not the easiest thing to get comfortable with that, you know. And people will challenge that, they will judge that, you'll challenge that, you'll judge that. I mean, our inner critic, in my opinion, is so powerful. Like, you should be doing this and you should be doing, you shouldn't be upset by that, and you need to go here. And a good person has the same job for 40 years, and they and that inner critic just, pardon my, well, beats the shit out of them. And just trying to realign with who you are and figuring out actually who you are, right? Based on your experiences and based on being okay with new experiences, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually just said that on an episode that launched, a couple weeks ago, and I've said it before, and you said it. Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because that uncomfortableness is you stepping into something you don't know,
Yeah.
and you grow from it.
Yeah.
It's an uneasy feeling. It's that pit in your stomach. Sometimes it's just a little bit of nerves, a little bit of anxiety. Maybe, you're affected by it and there's triggers that come up, based on those feelings, and learning how to manage those, and I talk about a not a cliche method, but I picked it up along the way, and I talk about it all the time because it's easy to remember. Control, Alt, Delete.
Yeah.
Control yourself, alter your mindset, and delete the negativity.
Yeah.
And it's simple, but effective.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, including myself, sometimes with a busy life, a lot going on, kids, family members, job, and any other, extracurricular activities thrown in there, that half, glass half full, glass half empty, analogy, throw whatever analogy you want on it. At any point in time, we have to have that self reflection. We have to be able to slow ourselves down and be able to actually process. That's the biggest thing, I think. Process what's going on to be able to make calculated decisions to move forward to better yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I did a talk and I participated in this men's retreat last weekend called Hero Self Mastery. And my talk started about, you know, how I work with people. And certainly it was about, big one is that self reflection, like a real hard, honest look at what's going on in your situation and being okay when that comes up. It's uncomfortable. Like, there's no way when we really look at ourselves that it's like, yeah, that's okay. And maybe for some people that's an experience. Most of the people over 23, almost 24 years now I've worked with are not comfortable with that. And it takes some time, And I know when I still try to do it pretty regularly, reflect on myself, where I'm going, things I'm screwing up on. It's not always easy, but the outcome, we don't know what it's going to be, but it's certainly going to be better than what I'm doing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And I do think there's still a stigma
Oh,
for guys, right?
yeah.
There's still that stigma of you're soft. I tell people I don't care what you think. I do to a certain extent, right? You have to care. But at the same time, if you're trying to express something to somebody, to open up to them so you can feel a little bit better of what's going on, it just needs to come out and talk about it, right? Through conversation, we can heal, and understand it better versus just leaving it up there for those thoughts to run around, and it's like when you're at a job and you have a task at hand and you think you know how to complete the task, but you go to your colleague and go, "Hey, what do you think?" And they go, "Well, yeah, but I've done it this way before." And you never would have thought about that unless you asked,
Yeah.
right? It's the same concept of bouncing that idea off, keeping your sanity, right? Where it's not just a thought in your head, positive or negative, but grasping reality for what it is and be able to positively move forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like when you hear the saying, boys don't cry, right? And, you know, boys to men in that transition, and you're soft. You're soft if you talk about your feelings. You're soft if you express yourself in a healthy way, or if you experience something and your response is either nothing or you're silent, because if you respond to it, nothing positive is going to come out of it, and people will judge that. To me, some of those are some of the most powerful things that people can do, for themselves, not just like for the whole situation, but when someone actually is vulnerable with themselves and saying, like, I'm going to talk to this person and I'm going to fight the urge to just shut my mouth or be quiet, because guys don't talk about their feelings, which in my experience is not true, because I've worked with lots of men and they end up talking about their feelings. And we get to that point where that just becomes their everyday thing. And you're going to, sorry, people lose some of their regular friends when they do that, when they realize that I'm not going to walk around with this inside of me anymore. I'm going to talk about things that may bother me, or talk about things that are really passionate for me. And they will lose some friends. They definitely will lose some relationships. And at the end of the day, though, they become this person that can not only talk about their feelings, express how they feel in a healthy way, but they can provide that for people, for other people in their life. When, a friend of them is needing desperately to talk to someone about, oh, craziness that's going on in their life, and they can just sit there and, like, yeah, hey, talk to me about that, without saying, you're really challenged as a man or a woman because you're talking about how you feel. Just own up, suck it up. And there's truth to those things. Like, sometimes we really got to buck up and get going.
All right.
But there's a balance to, in my opinion, there's a balance to that. And I think when people actually embrace that, when they get comfortable being uncomfortable and talking about their version of things and how they're experiencing the world, that just opens up a lot of things. And
Right.
I think they start to become a beacon of light, if you want, for other people. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to kind of piggyback off that for a minute, because we're not saying, hey, we got to, be this, big mush pile of like emotions 24/7. It doesn't have to be like that, but when the time arises to be able to let things go and grow a little bit more and understand what you're going through, you can connect with somebody else and they could give you a perspective. Otherwise, let it eat it up. Let it eat you up inside. Um, it's one of those things as guys, and girls too. Sometimes,
Yeah.
they hold the emotions because they either they don't want the reaction they think they're going to get, right? The judgment, whatever, right? And this isn't, seclusive just for guys, but girls as well, and not, confiding in your partner, your spouse, your, you know, other family member or friend because you want to uphold a certain image that you think they think you are, and I think that's one of the bigger challenges is identity, right?
Oh, yeah.
And especially like I talk about a lot on the show of, the identity of service members coming out of the military, or first responders, identity is a big thing. I get out and I'm a veteran, or, somebody that retires from the police force or fire department, and they're known as officer so and so or firefighter so and so. Who are you now?
Yeah.
Right. And that self identity gives you almost a sense of you're lost,
Yeah.
because now you have to, in a sense, reinvent yourself to the world of who are you?
Yeah.
Who's Ryan? Who's Lucas?
Yeah.
Right? If you strip away this podcast, you strip away, I'm a veteran, I'm a police officer, you strip all that away, right? Who is Ryan? And having that conversation with self and understanding, I think, is the most important thing, because when everything's stripped away, who are you?
Yeah.
And I do have to say that, with, PTSD, anxiety, self-improvement, divorce, we talked about it briefly, before we started the episode. It is concerning, service members, veterans, police officers, firefighters, people that have, you know, high demand jobs, a divorce rate being so high.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously some of it, people grow and go their separate ways. If it's not meant to work out, it's not meant to work out. But I do feel like there's, some of those relationships, and I bring it up because I do have listeners email me and stuff, and divorce was more than one. There was a few that sent, service members, in divorce, police, fire, and divorce. How do you think that the mental health aspect to that, of being able to better communicate, and that might not just be it, with your spouse or your loved one, can have a positive effect moving forward, or a negative effect?
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge concern, and it's a big part of what people experience, uh, especially when they're servicemen and women and first responders, and they are in a relationship. And you know, it's challenging because those men and women, they get up every day and go to work, and their experience usually isn't the same as someone who um, goes to a different type of job, where their job is based on service. They're there to help people as best they can. A lot of those people, a lot of those experiences are extreme,
Right.
and it's hard to unidentify from that all day long and then go home after 12 hours and then identify with being a husband or being a wife and talking to the kids, and there's that missing piece of how do they integrate themselves, like this one identity, into this identity of being um, Luke the dad, or Luke, you know, and it's a challenge for sure. And there's lots of divorce rates. I mean, I'm divorced, right? And I'm open about that. And, you know, people be like, well, therapists don't experience a lot of trauma. And at first, I used to think that, like, you don't. But there's lots of that vicarious trauma, right? That you're listening to people talk about their struggles every day. And if I think one of the missing pieces is really identifying that, like being okay with, yep, these jobs create in people a whole different identity. And it's hard to relate that to somebody who's not working in a field like that, where
Right.
they are having to come home and really figuring out who they are now. Right? And also that partner at home is trying to figure out, so what am I going to get? What comes through the door? And that creates a lot of chaos for people. What I feel is that we don't actually talk about that with those service providers, that, hey, you need to realize this may cause some challenges in your relationship. This, and how, like, we have this format of you working and your partner working and coming together, right? And making that normalized, that, you're probably going to have to talk to somebody, with somebody. It could be your pastor, it could be anybody, like coach, whatever it is, about how you're seeing that person when they come home, how that person's feeling when they come home. A lot of the stories I've heard is like, Luke, I don't want to share with what I saw all day. I'm a police officer. I don't want to talk about all that stuff. I don't want to download that onto my partner. However, the partner sometimes can be like, I don't understand why they're acting this way. They're always quiet, or now they're heavily drinking. They're very quiet. They don't engage with their children anymore. They don't engage with me, right? And there's that fundamental, that communication has been almost in some ways stagnated because they came together and they obviously cared about each other, and being of service is a fantastic thing. It's, I have so much respect for people that's their gig, right? They're being of service to people, right? But I think and this is just my opinion now, and a lot of therapists might not agree, is that being open to when people start in those things to really bring home, like, gonna have to figure out a language for you and your partner to talk about these things, and bringing and normalizing that, right?
Right.
I think there's a ton of work to be done there because there's a high divorce rate for service providers and people that are doing those types of services and work. And there's a high cost for both, like both the person doing it and the person who's trying to care about them and love them. And those dynamics, yeah, they're very expensive. And I think there's a ton of work that we can do. But, like we talked about, being vulnerable about that and opening up, like, how do we start that discussion?
Right.
Without people feeling that, hey, if I talk about my experience at work, but maybe it's not talking about experience, maybe it's talking about the feeling like, am I actually doing anything at work? Am I actually providing service for people? Or am I, like, maybe that's where to have the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're gonna touch more and dive in depth more about that. Of not everything is read in a book. Not everything
No.
is you know is black and white. And just use one saying and you're going to get through it. So we're going to dive more in depth with that. But we're going to take a commercial break and
Okay.
check out Support Vets app.
It's a noble calling to join the armed forces and defend our freedoms. It's a testament to the determination and love freedom requires to care for your family while your spouse is deployed. It's a profound honor to uphold the legacy of those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. It's inspiring to choose to support veteran-owned businesses. It's rewarding to give of your time and resources to veteran service organizations. Together, we can lift our veterans and show them our heartfelt gratitude. They've given us so much. Let's give back with all the support and appreciation they deserve.
And you can download Support Vets app now on your mobile device. Amazing app. I spoke briefly with you about it. It's a global app launching in the US on July 4th, then the UK, Canada, Australia to follow, where veteran service organizations, veteran-owned businesses will be able to connect with each other. Amazing technology coming up. And that's the biggest thing, I think. One of the biggest things is connection.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't have that connection, that sense of loneliness, right? The emptiness, sets in, and those thoughts, right? Of, I can't do anything else. Nobody's here for me. Like, why can't I connect with people? I knew that was one of my things. I couldn't connect with people the same way I did with the service members that I served with in the time that I served. I couldn't connect the same way. And I thought to myself, I'm like, am I like, is there something on my face? You get that feeling like it's an external thing, right? And then it eats you on the inside and like, what am I doing? And you sit there and you go, why can't people connect with me? And I think a lot of times it's not just service members, first responders and stuff, everybody goes through it, right? At one point or another through their life, you may have experienced it. But going back to that, get comfortable being uncomfortable, because having the conversation first with somebody that, maybe you don't even know them, right? And just opening up and getting a perspective, I think, is going to be tremendous, and learning yourself. And I also say, you can't be 100% for somebody else if you're not 100% for yourself first. And I truly believe in that, because, like you said, in the professions, healthcare, mental, everybody says healthcare, and it's like there is so many jobs, right? So many jobs in healthcare, and everybody goes through their, traumas, or, their mental health struggles, different experiences, maybe the same experience, but in a different way,
Right.
And having those open discussions and conversations, and being able to understand the perspective from each one of the jobs, and aspect of, okay, we may not be doing the same thing, but we're feeling the same way, right? And how are you getting through it? How can I help you, or you help me? And, we can together, grow, and that leads me to the next point. You were talking about, being being in the mental health side of things, and talking with clients, and, people, and, the whole like client thing, just the word client, I feel, and this is why I wanted to bring you on, because I see how you present yourself and talk and everything else. I don't think that you just see it as a client, right? You see it as somebody that is looking for advice and perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting how that came about. I think a lot of it had to do with, being what they call a client myself, and how those people related to me. Like, they connected with me, they were real with me, they were honest with me, they listened to me. And I remember being in school, and this prof, he was like, you always get people that are just kind of out there. And he was so real. He's like, the people you're going to work with are going to be your greatest teachers. You're not going to learn that in a book, Luke. You're not going to learn any of that in a book. It's going to be sitting with people and listening to them, and really listening to them, not listening just to, like, to respond to them, but listening to really understand them. That's a human being sitting across from you, someone that, is in pain, that they just really need to connect with somebody. And you might be that only person for them that happens. Right. And so it was like, it just sort of opened my mind up to, we can call them clients, we can call them whatever that we're calling people these days that come and use my services or use other people's services. But at the end of the day, they're a human being.
Right.
And so that always stuck with me. And just, they're my greatest teachers. And some people in my field be like, Luke, you're there to teach them. And I'm like, well, maybe, but I'm also there to learn. Right? I
Right.
learned so much from the people. Like, it's such a gift to sit with people. Like, I can't say enough good things about it. Like, they're the gift, not me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a good message for other people in your field, of the mindset, right?
Yeah.
Of how you. It's not about how much and but life experiences can vary so much, and you could be the best bookworm out there, and be able to you know verbalize definitions of words and everything else. And we talked about this before. There was some words I was going through. I'm like, let's get fancy with it for a minute. Let me bring up some like medical terms. And I'm like, that's not me. What? you know, it is critical, in connecting with. I think that one of the things connecting with, if you're going to go talk to somebody, know that maybe you need to shop around till you find somebody that you connect with.
Yeah, that's a huge one.
And I feel like some people, they get into that thing of like, who's the best recommended one, right? Somebody to talk
Right.
to. Maybe they're not for you, right? Because they
Yeah.
can't connect on your level. It's just it's the same as like, you're not going to hang out with everybody in your neighborhood because you don't connect with everybody, right?
Yeah.
You may connect with them in a small amount, but then you have like your deep close friends, and that's that feeling I believe you get when you talk with somebody that you can truly gain perspective from, because you're actively listening, you're processing it, you know, you're actively listening, and it because it's engaging for you, you know? And I find a lot of times for myself that doing things and talking about things that give you that dopamine dump of good feelings, right? It's like you want to go fast in a car, you want to ride your motorcycle, you want to go skydiving, you want to, like those thrill seeking things, whatever they are, you know, going for a walk, the feeling that, you get from going for a walk and listening to what's around you, whatever it is, finding it, and harnessing that into a positive thing to have it in your life all the time. You know, Sometimes I sit in silence, and I've talked with people before and I said, I need to have my own board meeting. Right. And I'm not joking. Right. I sit there and I go, okay, I've created, this great studio. I'm sitting here. Okay. What's the next step for me? Understanding that forward progression, right? If you're truly embracing forward progression, you never stop learning, and whatever avenue of approach it is, whether it's upgrading to in this case, the better media stuff, or learning how to talk a little bit better, and this podcast has helped me do all of the above, right? It's an outlet for me just as much as it is for somebody to come on my show and tell their story, because if you ask anybody, I like to talk, you know, and I had that kind of, I guess you call it a breakthrough, with the podcast of, okay, I've created a platform where people feel comfortable enough to open up in a different way, and the unorthodox uh, therapy of sorts, I guess, um, through conversation, we heal, and through your profession, what do you find is like most draining, for you, if there is any?
Well, that's a great question. When I think about it, like what's most draining for me, I think it's changed throughout the course of my experience working as a therapist. You know, at first it was draining because I thought I had to be really good and connect with every client, you know, and then that, I realized I can't connect. I can't connect with everybody, and it's not uh, a conviction of I'm not good, or they're not listening. It's really there's that connection's just not there. And so I started really opening up to that with with people that would come and see me, and I'd be like, "Hey, if there's a time when we're talking and you feel like it's just not connecting, let's talk about it, and let's see if we can find you someone maybe you have that connection with." And that conversation would open up whole different things, and I didn't feel like this pressure to make sure that they were okay. And then that was the next piece, is that uh, people come to you in stages, you know, and they may come for one, two, three, four, five, six sessions, and they sort of get what they need, and then they go off and embrace their life. Right? And so that was a challenge, right? And And I realized what the most draining thing for me and the biggest learning was that I couldn't and I wouldn't be everything to everybody. And I thought it had to be, and that was a huge moment for me, and realized that I wasn't being authentically myself. As probably about year 15, I didn't really start. If people ask me, well, what experiences do you have? Like, tell me a little bit about yourself, Luke. I'd actually talk about it, and it's kind of like in the healthcare field, it's like, you don't do that, because the fear is that their session becomes about you and not them. But the balance is that they actually get to know a piece of you that just isn't out there, right? That this is what he looks like, but actually he's had this experience or he's had that experience. And that for me was that huge unfolding. And then when I went from working into private, as I was working with a huge conglomerate in British Columbia, which was fine, but I just wasn't relating to that anymore. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out and do my own thing. And the relief from that, I mean, was it stressful not having, don't know where the paycheck's going to come from? Yep. But it opened things up for me in a way that I could actually be Lucas. I could talk about mental health aspects, talk about the power of prayer for people, talk about the power of meditation for people, talk about the power of, exercise, not based on what you see in Muscle Mag, but that your physicality is so important in the world, which are not always dynamics in government-run agencies. And that doesn't mean they're bad. It just means it's not their forte. And so really embracing that piece was a huge eye-opener for me and allowed me to get really comfortable with me and being who I am. And, that comfortable being uncomfortable, you never know how it's going to go when people talk about, well, what do you mean you meditate? What does that look like? And there could be, all kinds of different dynamics that come out in that. But you're comfortable with the fact that that's who you are, and you're going to be uncomfortable if they don't agree with you. And that's fine.
Right. Yeah. And I want to dive into sleep a little bit, right? So, the listeners and watchers are starting to quickly realize that I joined Space Force, fairly recently in the last few months. I have my CPAP, and frequently I sit there and I go to my daughter and I go, "I am your father." But it is, I joke about it, but I can't not wear it now, right? I had a sleep study done and I stopped breathing like 40 plus times a minute. And I didn't realize how much I was missing because I wasn't able to process what was going on around me because I was so extremely tired, not realizing that I was tired, And I'm going to reiterate that because not understanding that you're getting good, adequate sleep and you think, no, I can operate, I'm good. And that was my thought process, right? I'm good to go. I got the X amount. I remember falling asleep at this time and I remember waking up at this time, and you think you got your 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep, but you get that like midday drag, the yawns. Those are indicators your body is telling you that you need rest, right? And so often than not, I did not listen to my body. Granted, I can't take a nap at work, but which would be amazing to get paid to sleep. Right. I've always dreamed, of getting a job where they pay me to sleep. Except I didn't sleep really good because I wasn't breathing really good. And when you don't breathe really good, it really affects your life, And the point is, good, adequate sleep, not putting like a time limit on it, but understanding that sleep, good or bad, is going to have a good or bad effect on how you interact with people, how you're able to handle your life, how you're able to get through your day, and be able to process what's going on around you. And you may be missing out on more than you realize because you're so drained all the time and not know that you're that drained because your body is slowly trying to adapt to what's going on now. My question to you is, of everybody you've talked to, and they talk about not getting good sleep and their brain not shutting off because they're thinking about this, that, and the other thing, tossing and turning, then they're able to fall asleep at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. They get the 3, 4 hours of sleep, and then they get up and, it's that cat nap energy, right? But it's not truly allowing your body to rest. And what have you seen where people have been able to start getting better sleep based on, letting stuff go, right? How it's, adversely affected them positively moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because one of the first questions when I just start working with somebody is that, how are you sleeping? And usually it's, well, not bad. I get 3.5, 4 hours sleep a night, but, or, I might get 6 hours of sleep, but it's always broken. Right? So really they're not getting 6 hours. They're probably maybe getting 4. Right? And, as people progress, whatever speed they are, um, you slowly see that changing. What I notice is that it really depends on how much that brain of theirs starts to slow down, right? And people will be like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, people who struggle with sleep, there could be sleep apnea or a combination of sleep apnea and, you know, other sleep disturbances, which is a busy brain. Some people call it that, busy mind. They lay down and they just can't stop thinking about the day or can't just slow that down. And when they start to actually go through the process of working on themselves, they slowly let that piece go. There's no like definitive way, right? Like with the sleep apnea, I've had tons of clients and they're able to either get that through their benefits or um, they have the finances to do that.
Right.
And they finally start realizing how little they sleep. And, you know, I often talk to people, but it's not just about the mind stuff we're working on, like really encouraging them to get physical, to start, like, even when they're working 12 hours a day and their job is physical, but still trying to find that, 15 minutes to get out by yourself and go for a walk. You know? People are like, well, I don't walk, I only run. It's like, well, let's start with walking. Right? And it's like a progress that starts with them, right? Like realizing that they have some sort of, they're an invested interest in this process,
Right.
that they're going to maybe learn some things, but really I'm reflecting back a lot of things. And that the more that they work on themselves, those things start to change. Um, and people are like, well, what's the reason behind it? And to me, the reason behind it is that they're probably for the first time in a long time putting themselves, like they're being vulnerable with themselves. They're self-reflecting on themselves. And then when they go to lay down, it's not the process of everything that happened in the day, or like I'm a bad dad or I'm a bad mom because I don't know how to connect with my kids anymore. I don't know how to connect with my partner. It becomes, wow, I did my job and I was able to, go out for a walk or do these types of things, and oftentimes we start with the behaviors, right? Like those are things that are really within your means to do
Right.
rather than the mind part, right? Like behaviors can be like trying to get adequate sleep, having some fun, right? Can
Right.
really change up your day. Having some fun with your kids or with your friends, and that's not always. And certainly not associated with going out to the bar and drinking and that, but just joking around with people. I mean, I made a video the other day about uh, me and my friend just walking around Kelowna here and like just taking goofy pictures and having some fun, right? I mean, I'm 51 years old, and people are like, "Well, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be serious." It's like,
Mhm.
it relieves that pressure, right?
Right. Yeah.
You know, and that's what I see with people is that the more that they, whatever it is, whether you're seeing someone like me, like a coach, a pastor, a minister, it's like when they take that time and they're not judging themselves for taking that time because that, like you talked about, that identity, right? um I have to have everything in control. Like I'm the dad, I'm the mom, and I don't have time for myself. Right? When they lose that, start to lose that identity, that it's really important to have some time for you, and that becomes part of that new identity. Those things slowly start to shift. So I don't know if it's one thing, but it's like a whole dichotomy of things start to pull them in a new direction. And the challenge with that is when you and I talked about get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's a huge thing for people. Taking time for themselves makes them feel really uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and just to kind of piggyback off that a little bit, I do think that a lot of people, and we're all guilty of it, allowing society's judgment to dictate your life,
Yeah.
right? Don't take this picture, don't do this, don't do that. That's not how you should act. That's not what you should do. I mean, granted, there's certain things like it's just if it's unethical,
Right.
right? The
Yeah.
bottom line is if you're a good human being and you're having fun with life, then just leave me alone. You
Yeah.
know, like being a good person, and if taking weird pictures or making funny video, I do the same thing.
Right.
I enjoy it. Like there's times where I've done those duet videos, and
Okay.
I crack myself up. Right,
Right.
like, and I think it's hilarious, and I show somebody else, and they're like, "Oh, cool," and I'm like, "Whatever." I think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
It just it's a testament to being comfortable for yourself. You don't have to get recognition from others, right? In every single aspect of your life,
Yeah.
you know, give yourself recognition that okay, it's an emotion. It makes me laugh. It makes me happy. You know, The same thing could be said for, sad, angry, whatever. It's
Yeah.
an emotion, right? That's what you feel. Somebody may not feel that way, but if it makes you feel that way, it's okay to feel it, right? And then something else will happen and it'll be bad or good and you move on, And I had Craig Wayne Boyd on here and, he was talking about his song, Let It Ride, Let It Roll. And he was saying, you got to let that rubber ducky just roll off your back, and little things have stuck with me as I do this podcast and different people I talk to in different walks of life and how they, perceive life in general, how they see it in their eyes, and that perspective and the generosity of words and wisdom in which they provide on the show is, what I love about this because I gain perspective from other people, and it's a give and take, it's a long distance relationship with all my friends around the world,
Yeah.
like it's like when people, and I'm going to bring people back to COVID for a minute, right? When the world shut down, right? And we lived in what we thought were our glass houses, you know, and then you started to realize that you didn't need much in life to try to enjoy it. Now, there was the other side of it where the people that could not go with social interactions, there was a damaging side to it as well that's not being talked about enough, right? It's being talked about, but I do think that a lot of the mental health issues that have evolved from COVID, right, have changed the trajectory in people's lives if they don't look where they were and where they're at now of how that had an effect on them, And I think it's very important to understand that as well we joke about COVID, we joke about the mask, we joke about, there's some joking talking points to it because it's somewhat behind us now, but it's really not. You know what I'm saying? And I think, when it's that uncomfortable, thing, it's easier to joke about it and move on and not actually talk about it because it makes you uncomfortable. Like the word suicide, you know,
Mhm.
PTSD, anxiety, a lot of politicians, they want to throw the word out there, but they don't want to actually understand it. You know, I'm not saying everybody, but
Mhm.
those uncomfortable conversations to be able to have those with people that do understand it is invaluable.
I mean, yeah. It's interesting, right? Is having the uncomfortable conversations about a lot of these things, right? Like COVID, and what it showed us as a human society,
Right.
uh, what it brought forward. Um, working in the field as a therapist during that time for um, where there was lots of rules in place. You could only see people this time, and they had to wear masks and had to do this and had to do this, and that created a whole different scenario for people. You know, and we don't really talk about that. I know people ask me about it. And they're like, "How was it working as a mental health therapist during that time?" It was challenging, you know, and it was challenging for people I work with, because it really changed up things for them.
Right.
And it's to have the conversation, not to prove who was right. In my mind, to have that conversation, it was who was right or who was wrong, but what those things did and brought about for people. Because I think my experience has been it showed a lot of people strength in communicating this way, like uh, through technology. But for some who weren't comfortable with that, it really shut down any ability to figure out, how do I communicate with people? Like, how
Right.
do I communicate my needs or my wants? And it's interesting. People will ask me, "What were your thoughts?" And I'll be like, "Well, you know, I was pretty open to people just, well, you do what you feel is necessary for you. Like, I've known you for a long time. That's not changing my relationship with you." Whereas you would see some people really struggled with, um, well, that relationship's going to change because you're not doing what I'm doing. And that doesn't, it's not to prove anyone right or wrong, but it's interesting that we struggle. Sure, my experience has been that people really struggle with that part, like just accepting people as, well, that's your choice to do that and it doesn't fit for me, and having that discussion, and these are the reasons that doesn't fit for me, or this doesn't fit with me. And I think it goes back to that vulnerability and that the ability to talk about how you feel about something, and sharing that narrative with somebody, knowing that they may judge you, they may not. But I think, like you said, we joke about COVID. I think it showed us a lot about how we interact as human beings, and that's a discussion that needs to be had. But we talk about, people throw out labels like anxiety, depression. Like, there's different levels. Like, anxiety often can be um, people just not feeling like they have a voice. And what's that going to sound like? How is it going to, like, I don't know the words to use.
Right.
Depression often sounds a lot like, people are repressed because their emotions are so, and they don't know what to do with it, right? What do I do with this, Luke? And how do I, you know, and that's the beginning of the conversation to me, right? And you're right. I think a lot of politicians in North America, including both our countries, um, they're good speaking points,
Right.
and but I think there needs to be more discussions on both ends about how people are experiencing those, and what do we do to allow that to have a voice.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. It's not about the label, right? It's about the feeling,
Yeah.
you know, and talking about the feeling is the root of the label, right? We talked about this before is, the medical dictionary psychology, right, had the words and what it means, and even the dictionary itself of if you just go and pick out the words, that mean different emotions, it's got a description, but that description may change a little bit depending on the person, right?
100%.
And it changes. Maybe you and I went through the same thing, but we came out of it with two different things, right? Whether both negative, both positive, positive and negative, and how we feel about what happened can be entirely different because our brain has processed it different, right? And which kind of leads me into with PTSD in particular is adding a substance into your body after a traumatic incident and not allowing your brain to heal and process what happened, I believe can have a very more traumatic effect in being able to get through that traumatic incident. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know for myself that in the start of my career, I would have been like, well, yeah, medication and talk therapy, absolutely the way to go. And then I started listening to, and maybe you're familiar, he's quite popular in Canada, and some people don't really care for him, but Gabor Mate. And he would start talking about trauma, and trauma is not what happened to you, but it's what happened inside of you, and the room to work that through rather than, you know, medication has its purpose for a lot of things. But when we blunt things with a form of medication, and those can be like prescribed or unprescribed, um, I don't think it gives people the true ability always to work through those things. Now, I'm probably going to catch a lot of heat from that because I work in the medical field, but that's been my experience is that when people do have trauma and they're not blunted and there's a process, there's time for them to reflect and understand, right? For them, not Luke the therapist, but for them to really start getting some traction. To me, that's when people really make huge gains in understanding what they've been through, what they're feeling, how to give words to the feeling, and some sort of like a regulation for emotional regulation for themselves to learn to regulate that stuff that's going on for them. Because you can have two people in the exact same situation, and Gabor Mate talks about this. He talked about you can have 100 uh, veterans, and you know 20 of them experience PTSD, and the other 80 don't. And he attributed that to there's other traumas associated with those men and women before they even were in the service. But if you don't blunt that, right? And medication is great. It can really help a lot of people, and I've seen it help people. But it does blunt some people where they don't understand how to process that stuff. And to me, that's the big part, right? Is the processing part. And a lot of people in this day and age is like, well, uh, in service, like you've got 5 sessions to work through this, and I would often say like 5 sessions to they're a veteran. Like I don't know if I'm going to, 5 sessions is pretty limited, you
Right.
know. And so I think that whole dynamic of the rush to get through it, right? The rush to make it applicable. And I think, you know, medication has its points and its purpose and its place. But I do feel that sometimes those medications can take people that blunts them to a point that uh, they're just, they're still stuck in the numbness of things. That's
Yeah.
the best way I would describe it. Now, does that relate to everyone I work with? No, but I think that's the danger when people just start prescribing meds. And that's their expertise. And I'm not judging their expertise. I'm just saying that can be the danger sometimes when you're working through these things,
Right.
is that's the starting point. And in
Yeah.
most things, we don't start at the end game. We usually start at the beginning, which can be very frustrating for people because they have to figure out how to be uncomfortable with that.
Right. Yeah. I do have to ask you. I mean, somebody comes to you,
Mhm.
you're like, okay, all right. People tell me process it. People tell me regulate it. How do I do that? Right. I think that's the biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
People want this isn't an oil change for your car. You're not going in and going out, right? It takes time and there's no time limit on it. It
Yeah.
varies depending on the person, and I think that's very important for people to understand. And there's no right answer and there's no wrong answer, because what might be, say, somebody really benefits from traditional therapy, kind of by the book, in a sense of, and in my mind, I view kind of traditional therapy of you laying on the couch, you're looking at the ceiling, the therapist telling you close your eyes, breathe in slowly, breathe out slowly. What do you feel? That's what I mean. That's that cinematic, approach to what I think of traditional therapy. And then you got a conversation, and I think people need to understand, and this is why mindset is so important in every aspect that you have in your life. You adapt your mindset to it and understand that you could have a therapy session by just talking to your neighbor,
Yep.
right? You go over and you crack a beer or you have a cup of coffee. You're like, oh, how's your week? Oh man, it's been crappy, and you go into it. And then you leave and you feel a little bit better, and then you do it again, right? Because you guys, and girls are gaining, it's like guys trips, girls trips, going shopping with the girls. My wife does that. Not often because we got kids, but those outings, right, is a way to let things go and be able to communicate with what's going on and connect with the other individual and be able to feel a little bit better about what's going on with you. Maybe you just need it all the time, maybe, golf trips, whatever the case may be. And I think it's very important for people to understand that time,
Yeah.
you have to allow time to be time.
Yeah.
You can't set a stopwatch. This isn't, a 400-yard dash. When it comes to mental health, it's a lifelong journey, right? When the computer boots up, which is your brain, right, until the computer powers down, all right, and shuts off, and we go on to whatever realm people want to believe we go on to, all right, it's a lifelong journey, all right. People have to understand that. I hear the sayings, like sun will come up tomorrow, and all this other stuff. Yeah, it comes up every freaking day, right? We get it, right? It's called a solar system, right? But understand that you have time, all right? You have time, and being able to not put a time limit on it, all right? You're gonna not put that unnecessary stress in your life of, I have to get this done. It's different when it's, work. Think about the stress that's involved with projects at work, right? You got, ABC, X, YZ, and this has got to get done before this in order for this to move forward. And you have those timelines. If you do the same thing with your self growth on the mental health side of things, and you say, I got 5 days to get my brain right, right? You're going to sell yourself short because, maybe it's going to take a year. Maybe it's going to take 4. Maybe it's going to take a month. or a week, right? That's the whole point of it, is don't put a time limit on it. And, maybe somebody does, in 5 sessions, the magical unicorn comes through and, blesses you and everything goes away and you're good to go. But at the end of the day, it's not realistic, and setting your expectations to a realistic level, I think is very important in every aspect that you do, you know? That was one struggle with me and a lot of other military members getting out of the service. Our expectations are so high, because we're operating at such a level between the leadership, skills, everything else. And, the military is well-oiled machine and, yada, yada, yada. Managing your expectations throughout your day, understanding that you're going to have failures no matter what, and life's not perfect, and that's okay. I think truly is something that helped me, when I got out of the military, right? Because I'm there, people are going to fail you if you set the bar way too high, because that mental expectation you gave to them, chances are you didn't tell them you had that expectation, you know? What have you seen as far as like people coming in and those not managing those expectations properly, and once they get kind of a better grasp on it of, it's okay to not be okay sometimes, and it's okay to, you know, change your expectations as well based on the scenario.
Well, it's it's interesting, right? Because people have their expectations about, like, I just need to get through this so I can get my life back and get back to normal. And so I would often start with people and saying, so what are your expectations from therapy? Like, what are you hoping to get?
Right.
Well, I want to be normal. Okay, so what does that mean? And it would be, well, I want to get back to who I was before X, Y, and Z happened. There's lots of pressure from, as they would describe it, there's lots of pressure from my partner for me to get back to who I was. And I would often start with, well, would the person, if I met that person, would they be here talking to someone to work on themselves? Like, no, I never needed anyone's help. And I'm like, okay, so that's a change in you. That's a change in your mindset, that you realize that you need to do something different.
Right.
And they'd be like, oh, and then it would become the time limit, right? Well, so, people would start talking about everything that they needed to change, all their experiences, and your hours up. And they'd be like, okay, so now give me some stuff to do, like fix me. And this is the first session, right? I'd be like, well, okay, so I'll give you some stuff to do. What's it like to slow down and realize that, everything you're going to figure out for you to do is going to come from you? And they'd either be like, this is how people would talk to me, like, fuck you. Or they'd be like, so I'm going to really have to work on myself. It's like, yep. Because you're realizing something needs to change. And to me, that's the beginning of that mindset, right? That they're in a spot where they know they need to do something different, because if they keep doing what they're doing, it's not going to work out well for them and their family or their friends or their job experience. And, like, I think mindset is everything,
Right.
right? I really truly do. And people are like, well, you're a therapist, not a coach. And I'm like, yeah, but it's a word though. Like, the mindset is so important. And realizing, like you said, the military or big government agencies, they're well-oiled machines, right? There's high expectations to deliver.
Right.
And then you come out of that and you're in the, what I would call the regular world. And we're still holding ourselves to these high expectations. Yet we haven't had the conversation like, well, And can I meet those high expectations? What's it done to me to try to meet these high expectations? And then we talk about self-development. And I really struggle with that word. I prefer self-developing. I don't think it's ever done. I
Correct.
think the risk with it's great to have the whole self-development movement, and I think it's wonderful. But I think if we get that idea that, it's just between here rather than there's a starting point, there's no end point, like especially with your mental health, it's going to change from day to day. You're going to find things that work really well for a time period, and then they don't seem to have the same effect. So it's like figuring that out, changing that mindset, like that, I have to do this and this is what's going to happen. It's like, well, what if you change that mindset? It's like, I'm going to like work on me, and I'm going to enjoy and get frustrated with the person I'm becoming, but realizing that there's no time limit on it. I'm always developing. Like even myself as a therapist, like people are like, so like you've been doing this a long time. Like, so you must know everything. It's like there's so much stuff I don't know. And I'm continually trying to learn and have different experiences and see things in a different way. I don't think Lucas will ever be completely developed. I think that that mindset, is that changing. Like you don't have all the answers. You can find different answers. But I think the danger is when people hold that, like hold other people, and maybe this has been your experience, like you're going to give me the answers. It's like I may give you some ideas, but you're going to come up with the answers. And I catch some slack for that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But if you can help people build that mindset that they are like the driver of their life, they are the driver of these things. And what works for Luke may not work for you. What works for this client may not work for that client. And that's okay. Right. And
Right.
that's how I feel about that. I think it's a very powerful thing when people start to change their mindset, right? And realize there's a lot of power that we hold as individuals, especially when you're coming out of these very well-oiled machines, that you can direct your life. But that's a whole brand new identity, right? Like if you're told when to get up, when to do, what to do, and then all of a sudden that's over. And now you have to figure out when to get up, what to do for exercise, how to relate to people, how not to relate to people. That's a whole different shift in your mindset.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
my take on it anyways.
No, absolutely. I agree with it. And it's a great point because, a lot of times in this goes for anybody that never even served in the military or like high capacity, well-oiled machines of, quoting kind of that type of thing, but
Mhm.
just life in general, right? As you elevate yourself, right, there's going to be times where the people that you originally surround yourself with may not be there, right? And either A could be you went in a negative direction and they don't want to be a part of your life, or you're in such a positive trajectory moving up and elevating yourself to the point where it's, a career field, whatever the case may be. It's not that you don't care about them. It's
Mhm.
just you're elevating yourself at a more rapid rate, and you guys and girls are not the common, ground in which started the relationship. And I talk about the relationship not in the aspect of, marriage or a couple or, being together, but a relationship between two people, and say, I elevate myself where, now I'm starting to travel around the world, and Lucas and I used to be, peers starting off. And I started elevating myself, and things went in a different direction in the trajectory of my life that we've kind of parted ways. And I find that a lot of people, they take offense to it, right? The success of others,
Yeah.
they take offense to it, and they try to bring them down, so they don't succeed. Do you think that is a jealousy thing? Do you think it's a loneliness thing? They don't want to lose that connection that they remember they had when things started, or is the other person just not willing, right? They may be able, but they're not willing to elevate themselves at the same rate, or at least try.
I don't know what the definite answer would be. I think it's a number of things. It's it could be a jealousy thing, because maybe you've changed your trajectory in life and it seems like you're getting more attention and you're moving along. Or it could be, they might be feeling like they're going to be left behind, that you're going to meet a whole bunch of new people, which you tend to, and not feeling the comfort and the strength of that relationship that, you know, I have a friend that I've known since I was 15, right? And we are so completely different. I mean, his nickname is Big Rig and mine's Tiny Tank, right? We are so completely opposite. And, he said to me, like therapists, they don't know what they're talking about. And we have this just strange dynamic between us, right? But I've never felt he's ever felt jealous of me. I've never felt jealous of him. Any success he has, I celebrate it. He's a great guy. He's really good at what he does. He's a good human being. And he's done the same for me. So I think a lot of it stems with, how people genuinely view that relationship. Like we've had a lot of years between us. There's been a lot of shit both of us have gone through, whether agreed upon or not agreed upon. But there was always that sort of, I call it like, and it's not original, from an old colleague of mine. They used to call it that boundary of respect, where you begin and they start. And
Right.
that's, I would say, in that relationship, we always have that boundary of respect. Like he's my only friend that I've known for that long, will tell me stuff that I don't want to hear. And I know it comes from a place of love and caring.
Right.
Where I've had other people that say shit to me, and you're just like, you can feel the jealousy, you can feel the anxiety in it, and it's not coming from a genuine place. So I, it's a great question. I think it really depends on the relationships, right?
Yeah, and I also think that you hit it home is understanding, the ones where it is a jealousy thing, right? And understanding the ones where, people are being honest with you,
Yeah.
And I do feel like sometimes it can be misrepresented, right? They may say, or they don't deliver it the proper way and it gets, taken the wrong way, and they do mean good by it, but then they also they have that knee jerk reaction of sorts, like, you get, defensive, then they get defensive, and then things start falling apart, And I do think the vast majority, you know, uh, people that you have in your life or whatever want to see you succeed, right?
Mhm.
I do feel though you can't let the 20%, if we're going to put a percentage on it,
Yeah.
right? You can't let the 20% dictate to your life, dictate to you what your life is, the path that you're going to go on,
Yeah.
and drowning out the noise, right? Learning to be able to drown out the noise, understanding what the noise is. You can drown out the noise, but that could mean just drown everything out. But you have to drown out the noise that is negative, right? And no matter what, like if you think it's best for you, then do it, right? That's the biggest thing, you know? Haters are going to hate.
Yep.
Taylor Swift said it. So it's true.
Yeah.
And you got to shake it off. It is true. And I like to joke about it because, I've gone through it in my life. I will continue to go through it and everybody else will too. But understanding that you only need 5 core group, friends, hardcore friends, right? To be able to really harness who you are.
Yeah.
It's not about quantity. It's about the quality of the people that you surround yourself with, and That leads me to my next point. Social media. How many followers and subscribers do I have? The amount of people that it, it is important to a certain extent, depending on what you're using it for, right? And I bring it up because it is important to your mental health.
Mm.
If you sit there and go, I don't have X followers, I don't have X subscribers, and that's how you dictate how you carry yourself in life, you just need, you know, however many good followers. And I hate kind of the word followers, right? I do the leader thing, but like 5 good people, or maybe one, right? That can lift you up when you're down, that can be there during your successes and support you all the time, no matter what, you know, and has that admiration for you and it is just a good human being, you know. Take, you know, people want to be like Mr. Beast on YouTube, you know, and when they're not, you know, they look at it as a failure, you know. It's not, you know. You will succeed in your own way, you know. And I could have 10 subscribers, right? The whole point of the followers or subscribers, people could be seeing your stuff, they just don't subscribe to stuff, right? I've had people, you know, that I'll see them around, or you know, I'll talk to them on the phone and be like, "Oh, I caught that last episode," and "Oh, I haven't subscribed yet. Sorry." You know, it's there,
Yeah.
right? Just put out good, and if people pick it up, they pick it up. If they don't, they don't.
Yeah.
You know, I think that social media can be used in a positive way, but you have to manage your expectations on what it means to you and how you can continue using that tool in a positive way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'll put it in perspective. Like my daughter thinks she's a YouTuber, right?
Mhm.
And I have a separate StreamYard account, you know, I have because she wants to be like daddy. That's on her computer, and she just does closed recordings,
Mhm.
right? And but she loves it. She loves, you know, doing, you know, this is the different nail colors and yada yada yada. This is my dog, you know,
Yeah.
and she has like her own little mic. She's got her headphones and her little laptop, and she's got like her own little desk, you know, and she just likes recording. And, you know, her imagination, it's like the kid, you know, I was one of those kids where I didn't need to have somebody around to have fun, right? Being comfortable with what you're doing with yourself, you know, and the innocence of an 8-year-old. You know, I've had her on the show before, and I titled it Thoughts of an 8-Year-Old. And one thing that stuck with me is she said, you know, people need to understand the bad in order to be good.
Hmm.
Coming from an 8-year-old.
That's pretty profound.
Yeah. And I went, all right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, and she furthermore went on and she said, you know, the bad can be good. They just don't understand. I'm like, where did you come from? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we were just talking, you know, before like we were doing it. She's like, yeah, we'll talk about the summer, blah, blah, blah. And then she dropped some knowledge on me. And I'm like, all right. Yeah, you're right. You know? And I think that, you know, this is kind of a long point, but the innocence of kids, they don't know, you know, right or wrong until we teach them, right? But they also don't know how to be mean unless we teach them. They don't know how to be bad or good unless we teach them,
Right.
right? So the innocence, I think that's where we need to revert ourselves back to. And when we see children interact with each other, there's no animosity. We're the ones that teach them, you know, and seeing that innocence. And that like very profound, like deep thought process from an 8-year-old, I went, you're right. Good is good, bad is bad, and we, just have to understand the bad to be good. That's all I got to say about that.
Kids are powerful teachers.
I know. It's truly amazing.
Yeah. It's with the whole social media thing, and my point on that would be that, people ask me about it, and my first answer is generally, well, it's just a bunch of BS anyways. Like, I don't know how many of the followers are real followers or if they're bots or right, but it's a way for me to get out my message. And that's what I felt really strongly about.
Right.
And one of my biggest supporters in social media is my 14-year-old daughter.
Right.
And, the thought that, I could put that message out and it might help somebody. It may relate to somebody, right? That's why I started it. It wasn't like it's not going to really make a difference to me if I have 3 followers or I have 3,000 followers. I'm not monetizing it or making money from it. I often get, well, why are you doing that? You're not making any money from it. It's a waste of time. And to me, it's like, well, it's kind of how the world has gone now. We're very geared to technology and to social media. There's some good things about social media, and there's some things about social media, especially when it comes to young people, I think, and older, is sort of unrealistic expectations. And, that everyone's going to be a Mr. Beast. And, that's your goal. I'm going to be an influencer. And that's great. But what we don't see and I know you can relate to this, is the work that goes into those things.
All right.
Right. That's where I find is the disconnect, like planning out your day, finding things to post that relate to you, that you think may relate to other people. Like it doesn't just happen. Right? I think I've been talking on social media for 2.5 years, maybe 3 years. And there's lots of times when I do talks on social media, there's nobody there. But in my heart, it's like, well, maybe someone will go back and they'll hear that.
All right.
And that will shift something for them. I can do that. I've learned that, and that's where I find the power of that. And my daughter has talked to me about that. She's like, well, Dad, you're just being of service to people. You often talk about being of service. And you never know who's gonna see it. And it may be like, yeah, maybe I need to go talk to a counselor or a coach or somebody else that may flick them, because in my line of work, lots of people have had bad experiences with therapists.
Right.
So that's it's an interesting thing. I mean, at my age now, 51, like, am I an influencer? I don't know, but it's what's happening. So I try to approach it in a way that it's not about that for me. It's about being able to get that message out there, that it's okay to talk about your mental health. It's a very common thing,
Right.
and it's, if people are, saying they have no mental health struggles, I want to meet them.
Right. Yeah.
So
Let's, before we move on to the next topic, I just want to kind of break that down a little bit. An influencer, right? One who influences somebody else, right? It can be one person, right, that you bump in for the week, whether it's, in the grocery store, in line at Dunkin' Donuts, and you're talking to the person at the window and you can tell they're kind of having a crappy day, and you're like, I hope you have a better day. That may influence them, right? Or you post something, positive on social media and you get no likes, but there's people that see it, right? And then, like I've said before, people have been like, hey, I saw your episode, and, it was great, and sorry I haven't subscribed yet, but I'll do it right now. People see it, right? The point of the whole thing is just remain positive and be a good human being.
100%.
And you don't know how many people you're influencing. It's just a number from a button that people click, you know? And there's no numerical level to hit to be an influencer, quote unquote. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
that is a new term, you know, where they you have millions of followers where, people, you're influencing a large group of people globally, right? Or nation, throw a nation, whatever. But you can still influence people in a positive way and not even have social media,
Yeah.
you know? So
I sorry, go ahead.
so that term influencer, right? I just want people to know you can still influence somebody's life in a positive way, even if you don't have social media.
I think when I that really hit home with me is I used to coach hockey for a number of years. Loved coaching hockey. And the number of kids over the years that would talk to me about, hey Coach Luke, I'm doing this now. Hey Coach Luke, I'm doing that. And so 2 years ago, because I didn't coach last year, it was the first year I just decided, you know, I'm getting up there a little bit and let the younger generation, take that over. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's a good thing. You sort of pass the baton and you do some different things. But that year, really started talking about mindset with a bunch of, 14 and 15-year-olds. Whereas some people were like, well, you can't do that. And other people are like, okay. And I didn't realize until the kids started talking about it, because I would often talk about control what you can't and leave the other stuff. So in hockey, there's a lot of like, a ref makes a call. And I would talk to the kids like, well, no amount of you talking to them is going to change the call. Well, what can you change? You can change how you respond to that. Right? And a lot of kids would just be like, I remember that, Coach Luke. And I use that in my life. Like if things are, no matter how much don't like it, it's my response to that.
Right.
And it's powerful. Right. And you're right. You can influence people being a good human being, just being genuine, like being authentic.
Yeah.
And it can have rippling effects that we may never know about. So, I think if we have the ability and the know-how and we truly believe in being a good person, I think that's a great place to start, because you just never know who you're going to, who's going to respond to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can relate to that too. Like when I was coaching youth baseball, a lot of the kids, that I coached are in college now. And when I bump into them, on their summer breaks and stuff, they'll be like, "Oh, hey coach," and that, because that's how they see me,
Yeah.
coach them for many years, helping them get to the next level, physically, mentally, and preparing them, for that next level and beyond,
Yeah.
and those positive teachings, passing on, from what we learn, to somebody else, maybe not just, kids, but that's the whole point, is anybody, pass on the teachings from what you learn to somebody else through conversation, right? And somebody may not take the whole conversation. They may take just one little piece
Right.
that they can apply, or they may not take anything at all, but they remember it. So then when they can apply it, right, there'll be that subconscious that kind of puts in the memory bank. It's a beautiful way the mind works, right? You remember that conversation. Oh my God, it dawned on me, deja vu, right? I had that moment, right? Oh, I remember this conversation with somebody. They said this. Ah, I get it now. You have that light bulb aha moment, right? And you're like, man, I got to call them, and be like, man, I'm sorry for the way I talked to you. Now I understand. You know what I mean? It happens, it happens. But, breaking it down and being genuine in the
Mhm.
moment, is going to have the most positive outcome down the road as well, when somebody doesn't understand it at the time, you know? So before we kind of wrap things up, what is one of the most important things anybody listening or watching today can take away from this, from your experience, in your life and your profession?
Hmm, That's a big question, eh?
You're
I
welcome.
think, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, uh, you just have to start, no matter you know, how much anxiety there might be or how much craziness is going on. You have to start. You have to start somewhere. And I don't know what the answer for that is, like where you start, whether it's, doing behaviors first or seeing someone like myself, watching your podcast, knowing that you have to start somewhere, right? And when you start, like when you as an individual starts on your journey of changing, and accepting who you are and working through that stuff, when you start that process, and there's no limit to what you can accomplish. But don't base that on, you know, social media or, if I do this, I'm gonna keep this and I'm gonna keep that. Because then that becomes makes that conversation into like you're doing it just to manipulate a situation. So like, do you really want to work on yourself? And I think when people are really reflective, like, and they get vulnerable, like we use vulnerability, and people have asked me about this. To me, the biggest vulnerability we can have is with ourselves. Like, I know that I'm screwing up. I know, like, you get vulnerable with yourself. Like, I got to start somewhere, right? And really being authentic to who you are, right? Because people are like, "Well, I don't know who I am," and I'm like, "Well, you need to take a really hard look at yourself, right?" And I think that's where, you know, my experience would be that you just have to start. You have to start with accepting what's going on with you and then changing that mindset. Like, it's not going to change unless you change. It's just something has to be different. And that can be terrifying for people. But if you start with that mindset, like something has to change. And I might go through 6 or 7 different coaches or 6 or 7 different therapists. And then I find one and that could be part of the whole process, but you have to start that.
Right.
Because I know my experience, like when I worked, I did a placement years ago with a place in Canada called John Howard Society. And the men and women that came to see me that weren't mandated to come, and not that there's any, like sometimes that works for people, but they knew I got to do something different or I just keep ending up in incarceration. I got to do something different, right? Those people would just skyrocket. And so that's what I would say that. And for me, that was a big thing, right? I just had to start and not accept the fact that, yeah, I had a learning disability. Yeah, I had all these traumas that happened to me. And, if I accepted that, I may be, over here still maybe doing this. But I started. It was hard. It felt gross. It, it was, it changed me, but I had to start somewhere. Right. And to me, I don't like, and I know a lot of people disagree with what I'm going to say is that, we all have a story and, not forgetting the first chapters because for me, and I think a lot of others, those first chapters made me into this person I am now. And I know my experience when I've shared that with certain people, they're like, well, that's bullshit because I don't want to, but I just don't see it any other way. And I'm at a point in my life right now where I can, I don't regret any of that stuff in the sense that I've learned so much from it. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fun. I didn't just like, oh, working through all this trauma. It's just great. No, that's not what happened. It was struggle. It was trial and error. It was up and down. There's times in my life I've been severely depressed, thinking about trauma as a child and all of that stuff. But it's forged me into this person now. And people talk about the grace of God or the grace of existence. You know, the ability to actually embrace who you are and who you're changing to be. You're never done developing. You're always moving forward. If you can just move an inch every day or every week or every month, you know, I think that's life changing. So
Yeah.
that's
And
what I would say.
yeah, and very well said. You just have to start, and you have to, people have heard it before. You have to start somewhere, right? So, but you just have to start, and, a lot of what you're saying, you know, you got to take your excuses and turn them into excellence.
Yeah.
Right. Because the excuse is because you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You don't want to face it. I'm guilty of it myself.
Mhm.
Everybody is, right? We're not, I'm not sitting up here like on this royal throne of Ryan's, never made excuses. I make excuses all the time, right?
Yeah.
People do it. It happens. You make not just in like big things, but small things too,
Mhm.
and eventually you get to it, maybe, but when it comes down to like really growing as a person, you got to take those excuses and turn it into excellence. And like you said, don't forget where you come from, because it makes you who you are. And that's okay. It's okay. But healing is the biggest thing, right? When you heal, then you understand where you're at now and you can accept it. Then acceptance comes, and I just want to say I appreciate and thank you for coming on the show. I'm glad we're able to connect. We connected many and many a times, but our schedules, and then yesterday, my wife, her flight was delayed like 4 times. She sat at the airport in Myrtle Beach for 4 hours.
Oh,
So that's where sorry, can't do it,
yeah.
but it, it's amazing when, you come on and we can talk. You take that time out of your day, and when you're able to connect, all right, you don't give up on something that you feel is going to be good, right? Just because there's obstacles in the way, just like the unseen obstacles of flight delays and whatever else that comes up in life. I knew that from seeing your videos and talking to you and stuff like that, I wanted to get you on the show. I could have been like, well, they ain't going to work. It's not meant to be. Guess it's not meant to be, life happens. You have to accept it. Right. If you don't want to accept it, that's fine, but find a way to move forward.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you have to accept everything. You could not accept it, but find a way to move forward. And just like Lucas said, just start. Well, I appreciate you. I do want to shout out to podcasttables.shop, believing in everlasting veteran and the mission moving forward. If you want to podcast professionally like Everlasting Veteran does, go to podcasttables.shop, and Support Vets app is out now. Go to your local app store, download Support Vets, connect with a veteran-owned business, veteran nonprofit, veteran service organization, US, UK, Canada, Australian, going global, to be able to better the veteran community. Lucas, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you enjoyed time on the show, and I hope we have many more conversations.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be on here. You have no idea like how touched I am that you wanted me to be on your podcast and talk. It's always a great opportunity to just talk about how I work and how I see things. and just the power of the people out there that are trying to change themselves. And I really appreciate you giving me that time.
One last question. Was the podcast like you thought it was going to be?
Yeah, it was even better. Because I talked to you a little bit, and I'm like, I really want to talk to this guy, because I think we will just sort of sit down, and and there's been other people I've talked to where it's very it's been scripted, and I'm like, that doesn't fit for me, because I never know what's going to come out of my mouth. So
Yes.
it was wonderful. I mean, I really appreciate the way you're sort of down to earth and just like, yeah, let's have a conversation and just
Yeah.
take it from there.
I think, and I think it's because I think being genuine and having a conversation, like I tell people all the time, like, yeah, I have nerves when I come on the show, my own show, just because sometimes I make up words too,
Mhm.
I extend the dictionary for what it is, so like, but now I'm at the point where I hope people are writing them down, because I'm going to create my own dictionary, like I just let it roll off my back, like whereas before, like I used to, really be critical of myself
Mm.
for the judgment aspect of putting myself out there more, and now I'm just like, I've had multiple episodes. I've made up words where I said them again and went, yep, that's not a word. And just keep going, but that's a testament to growth. It's a testament to, being able to understand, it happens in normal conversation, you
Right.
know, so, I mean, are you going to be able to delete normal conversations that you have not on a podcast? No, it happens.
Yeah.
So just, be genuine. And like, Lucas said, just start. Thank you, everybody. I am Ryan Landry, the host of the Everlasting Veteran Podcast, joining with Lucas Burton. And you, sir, have a wonderful day.
Will do. You too.